So this is our Syncly webinar. Syncly is a new product that we partnered up with, and we're just going to dive deep into this by talking about who we are first. So my name is Adam Hassan. I'm one of the senior account managers here at Ascertus. My role is really to work with our existing clients and new clients, support them on their actual business needs and objectives and so on, and present some of our key solutions out there. I'm joined today by the CEO and founder of Syncly, Stuart. So I'll let Stuart say hi.
Yeah, g'day guys. I'm Stu, down in Australia, as you can probably tell by my accent. Married to an English girl, so I can't seem to get away from England no matter what I do. Yeah, the founder of Syncly, having been involved in a number of legal tech companies, but a career of about 14 years, actually starting in the iManage space. So a lot of history there, I suppose, working with law firms from around the world, and now founding my own company.
That's great. Thank you, Stu, and thank you very much for joining us. So just a quick reminder, if there's any questions, please feel free to type them in the question box, and we're going to answer any questions at the very end of this webinar. Now, moving on, the agenda for this webinar today, we're going to first discuss the solutions that we've partnered up with here at Ascertus. Syncly is the main topic for this webinar, but just going to give you a quick overview of the other solutions we partnered up with and why we partnered up with them. And then we're going to dive deep into a Syncly overview. What is Syncly? Why did we partner up with Syncly? And then exactly like what are the key functionalities and the key business drivers for why our businesses and organizations choosing Syncly. And then Stu's going to give us a Syncly demonstration, show you exactly how it's used by firms and professional services companies and corporate companies. And then we'll dive deep into the question and answers. So again, just a reminder, any questions and answers, feel free to type them and we'll address any questions that have been asked. So here at Ascertus, some of you may already know, we're a leading provider in terms of software and solutions into the legal, professional services, and the corporate markets. Our core application in terms of our position, we're a leading iManage partner, so we provide iManage as our main solution in terms of like cloud implementations and support. But also we work with several other market leading solutions that integrate with iManage. So you can see here a range of different solutions here. The topic of this webinar today is going to be Syncly, which is going to be basically about the importance of synchronizing your data and governing usage, and the reason why, and also the reason why we decided to select Syncly. But here at Ascertus, we're in a really unique position where we have a range of different types of clients within the legal, professional services, and the corporate space, which puts us in a unique position to ascertain what are some of the challenges out there, what are the key themes that organizations are talking about in terms of improving efficiencies and collaborations and transparency and overall. And that allows us to go back into the market and choose and the right solutions to partner up with. And I'm really excited about this webinar today because Syncly, to be honest, has been such an interesting product, and you'll hopefully see the value in it after this webinar. After this webinar, the next webinar is going to be Cicero. I'll give you an overview of what Cicero is at the end of this webinar, but that's taking place tomorrow, and feel free to register and learn more about what Cicero is all about. So now diving deep into Syncly. So essentially, Syncly is a platform that's designed to help organizations connect their multiple other platforms together and then manage the movement of data between them. So you can see here a couple of examples: iManage, SharePoint, HighQ. The way it works is that the reason why we chose Syncly is because they have looked at all the other existing solutions in the market out there, and there wasn't one that specialized purely on cloud-based synchronization, so they built one. And we'll talk about the benefits of why a cloud-based synchronization is much better compared to the other solutions out there for solutions like HighQ, iManage, and SharePoint. But essentially what happens is that Syncly sits in the middle with a bunch of connectors that give law firms and corporate companies and professional services the ability to not just move data in and out, but to also control the data and being able to visualize how the data is moving around their organization. So giving your firm more oversight and understanding what type of data the organization is moving across and how to manage control, risk, and from a compliance perspective. So the key points here is that you have your DMS as your source of truth. working from one area, and then automatically data is moving from one area to the other. So if you have two systems in place like iManage or HighQ or iManage and SharePoint, you're still working through iManage while automatically there's two-way or one-way synchronization taking place. Another key benefit is you're avoiding duplicate data, and the benefits of that you can imagine is, I guess, cost saving, and also from a risk and compliance perspective, you're not having better control over your data. Work from any system at the same time, and then connecting with a wider organization. Being able to improve collaboration between different areas of the organization by having functionalities like two-way synchronization or one-way synchronization, and essentially as well. All this, I guess, adds to better efficiency, better collaboration, and better transparency as well, which will speak volumes to your clients and to your peers as well. How does it work? It's broken out into three main areas, really simply. The first function is to connect, and Syncly, basically the way it works is Syncly being a cloud-based connector enables you to connect multiple platforms together. This is done seamlessly. No code is needed. So most importantly, there's no need for expensive time or resource consuming integrations. It's all done pretty much cloud-based. The second function is to sync. And this is basically essentially in a nutshell, one-way or two-way synchronization, allowing you to manage the flow of data, reducing the manual effort of downloading and uploading documents from one platform to the other platform, which you can imagine, improves better efficiency, time saving, better collaboration throughout the organization. So for example, if one part of your organization is using SharePoint and the other part of your organization is using iManage, you're able to synchronize the data and improve collaboration between the two different departments or two different areas of your organization. And lastly, archiving. So Syncly connectors are enabled with advanced archiving functionality. And when configured, you can automatically archive documents, conversation histories, wikis, and many more types of information. So archiving allows you to avoid duplication, and reduce high costs associated to storage fees. So for example, if you have duplicate data sitting in HighQ and data sitting in iManage, you can streamline that and have it sitting in one source of truth rather than having it sat in multiple areas, which could contribute to high storage fees and storage costs and et cetera. Again, that also could also help to improve, that can help to promote better governance, risk, and compliance as well. So that's in a nutshell, just to summarize really simply, three areas: connect, synchronize, and archiving. That's Syncly pretty much in a nutshell. And I'm going to pass it over to Stu to basically demonstrate how it works. And I'll just quickly stop sharing my screen here.
You didn't take me out of it. You could just do my demo for me, Adam. That was better than I could present.
Oh, cheers, thank you. A lot of practice. So Stu, are you good to share your screen?
I am indeed. Let me just do that now. It's only just come through. All right. You should see a session has expired thing. So is that all good for you, Adam? You can see that?
Yep, all good. I can see that.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, look, thank you so much. And look, I guess first and foremost, thanks to Ascertus for inviting me into this webinar, and I guess for their interest in partnering with us globally for the expansion of Syncly as we go to market. There are very few iManage partners that have, I guess a global stance and a global sort of footprint that also have the history of working with iManage for such a long time, right? And I started in iManage back when it was interwoven, right? And Ascertus were around then. So, we're really fortunate, I guess, from my perspective, to have a partner in Ascertus that has just such a firm understanding of how these core systems like document management systems and collaboration systems function and the reason for that. So yeah, you're in good hands, guys, those of you who are working with Ascertus. So thank you very much. On to a little bit about us. So yeah, I guess, from my perspective, you just heard from Adam in sort of, positioning of the product. And, you've also heard me sort of mention a little bit about my history, but I also ran the Australian or Asia Pacific operations for HighQ for around 3 years. So having done sort of time in my iManage start of my career in iManage, and then later on in the HighQ space, and then a number of roles spanning across those two as well, I've always spent time working with law firms. But I've also spent a lot of time working with in-house legal. So I actually was the director of legal technology for KPMG, as they were, I think it's for the second time starting KPMG Law. And we actually worked collaboratively with the UK, a number of people who are still working with the UK entity of the legal transformation business. So you would see it as, I think it's legal operations and transformation services is what it's called. That framework, that process, that business model was actually something that I was, I guess, spearheading across the organisation here in Australia, and it actually got adopted by the UK business as well. So a lot of understanding as well, because I know there is also, corporate legal teams on this, a lot of understanding of the nuances and the differences between those two functions. So Syncly is a cloud-based platform, right? And it's not meant to be something that's difficult to use. Right, it's behind the scenes. there's a shitload of stuff going on, right? It is complicated behind the scenes, but that shouldn't affect the ability for you guys to quickly kind of get in and create a relationship between two systems. All right, so predominantly, I just want to show you a couple of things today. Yeah, we're a connector-based platform, right? So we provide you guys with a level of access to systems, and we've got a library that's growing. And if you've got access to these systems, it is simply a process of plugging in a couple of little details and you're connected, right? The wonders of modern APIs and REST APIs and all that sort of stuff allow us to create integrations pretty consistently. Now, all of these systems can talk in any direction, right? There's no hard-coded direction. It's not just iManage to HighQ. You could go HighQ to SharePoint if there was a use case for you guys doing that. You could equally go iManage to SharePoint, iManage to HighQ. So I won't talk too much about the connectors because it gets a little bit sort of geeky. What you really want to show you is, well, what's the purpose of those connectors? What do we do with them? And in Syncly, we talk about them as workflows. All right. So I'm going to create 2 workflows today, I think. The first one that we'll do is we're going to create a workflow between iManage and SharePoint, because it's a universal truth that corporate legal teams, SharePoint is like the ghost that won't leave you guys alone, and there's always the pressure there to sort of interact with the larger organizations. SharePoint's everywhere, but we're seeing more and more of a intent for the use of SharePoint from a collaboration perspective inside law firms around the world. It's been really fascinating to see that shift of, I guess, acceptance that SharePoint can play a role in there as well. So we've selected our iManage connector, and then we're just drilling into iManage here, right? So I'm choosing a workspace. I'm going to choose this workspace. I don't know who named that workspace. It's interestingly named, but we'll choose that workspace, and we will choose the documents folder, right? And then I'm going to synchronize, like I said, out to SharePoint. So I choose my target connector as SharePoint, and I'm able to then go and find SharePoint sites, right? So I've got a SharePoint site here called Syncly Testing, and in that SharePoint site, for those of you who are SharePoint people, you can have document libraries, multiple document libraries. Think of those as matter workspaces in iManage, right? So we've got a workspace here, a document library here that we're going to synchronize into. And then it's pretty straightforward, right? iManage out to SharePoint, we could choose either one of these directions, right? We have our connection now. Now we're just saying what direction is the data flowing between that connection. And so we'll just choose one-way sync, because a lot of people are doing that. Two-way sync is a really interesting use case as well. But if we look at how we then configure this one-way synchronization between HighQ and iManage, SharePoint and iManage, there's a couple of sort of configurations that you can choose from, and I won't talk through. It's pretty straightforward. Latest version only, right? We work with some law firms that use this specific relationship between iManage and SharePoint for knowledge sharing. And so it is just we don't need the organization to have access to all of the versions. I myself in the legal department or the knowledge department want to have the history of all of our knowledge as it evolves over the years, but the customer, whether they be the lawyers in the firm or whether they be the employees of the organization, only need access to the latest version. So there's little things like that will ensure that they are always accessing the most recent document or the most relevant document or the correct document in essence, right? And we can then look for things like, do I care if a document gets renamed? Yeah, maybe I do, right? I want that to be, synchronized. So we look for renames and we make sure that it gets renamed in the target location. If it gets moved around from a folder into another folder, we make sure that move happens in the target location. So, you get it, right? Syncing documents between one platform and the other and trying to keep them as faithful to the structure and the data that you actually want to present. We have the ability to offer filters. So it's just a little interesting one, depending on the use case. We might say, hey, this is a really sort of busy workspace inside iManage, and it's storing all types of documents. Sometimes they're Word documents, sometimes they're CSV files, I don't know. But for this relationship, I only want to synchronize files, for example, that meet the standard of a PDF file format, right? So it doesn't matter what goes into that document folder that I chose in iManage. Syncly will only look for PDF documents and only synchronize PDF documents. And you could go the vice versa, right? You could say, do not synchronize PDF files, but filters aren't mandatory. You don't have to have them. You could just synchronize everything, which we'll do for today. Alerts. This isn't an alert every time it does a synchronization because that would be pretty bloody annoying. This is actually just an alert for if there are any errors detected, right? If it couldn't synchronize a document because it's permanently checked out, or if it's documents going into iManage, iManage is really quite structured. It's going to go, hang on, I don't accept that file format, right? And other systems do. So if it picks up that it's trying to push a document into iManage and iManage goes, no, that's an error, right? That will trigger an alert to say, hey, we couldn't synchronize this, AVI file or this type of, information, HTML file or something like that. And then it's really quite simple, right? Is it a real-time thing? Are we running this real-time, or am I coming into Syncly? Maybe, we don't see a lot of this, but coming into Syncly and running telling it to synchronize manually each time. So we'll do it as real-time. You review, give it a name. And if I can learn to spell, I always do that when I'm doing demos. That's it, right? So we now have a workflow. Now, if I wasn't talking, that actually takes about a minute, right? Like you just bang, 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 there's my workflow, there's my relationship. And so that's pretty user-friendly, right? That doesn't have to be something that sits in the help desk department or some sort of, resource-constrained area that, is super technical. This can actually sit inside the business, or at least a degree removed from the deeply technical departments, right? And if you're an in-house legal team, this can sit with you. Like, you don't have to have this sitting with your organization's IT department. You don't have to have that bottleneck of having to request this, right? If you guys have the remit to do this and you own your iManage system, for example, then great. Go ahead, create that synchronization out to SharePoint and start sharing information with the broader organization. That's as simple as that, right? And I've got these systems open, and so if we just quickly go and chuck a file into this, it gets a bit boring watching documents go back and forth, but we'll drop it in there for a second, and we'll come back to it. But basically, you'll see that this, in a matter of moments, will have picked that document up and it will have moved it across to SharePoint. It should be pretty quick. All right. So there we go. Okay, it's moved it just to prove it. There it is already. So pretty straightforward, really quick, really real time, and that is the same two-way, right? And we can manage versions. There's a whole lot of detail that we can get into. But to keep you guys sort of interested in sort of the other areas of what the product does, we do talk about, right, connecting, syncing, and archiving. So archiving is an interesting one. Specifically, this is for those of you who are either going down the road of Teams or are an existing customer of something like HighQ. So if we think about the archival of data that sits inside Teams or inside HighQ or any future system of collaboration, it's not just documents, right? You put documents into Teams and then you go and create all this other stuff that Teams does, right? You go and create the planners and the notes and you have your conversation histories and those sorts of things. And the same is true inside HighQ for those of you who know it, right? You create wikis, blogs, tasks, databases called iSheets, all sorts of cool things. So you want to archive not just the documents because that's great, but we want to archive everything else that happened in there for records reasons. And so if I quickly go through and just create a second workflow now, and we'll do this one, as a HighQ workflow. We can choose, again, it's a consistent UI, right? So we can go and choose any HighQ site, and I can choose any target. I can archive down to SharePoint if I wanted to. A lot of people are going to archive down to iManage, but we're also looking at introducing things like Azure blob stores and all sorts of things for those of you in the technical departments on this call, where you're saying, hey, I actually just want to put this stuff on ice, right? And go even beyond iManage and put this stuff down there because ultimately we never delete data. So for lack of any other reason, I'll choose iManage again. And I can go, again, drill down, search for a workspace, it doesn't really matter. Find the location that this archival is going to go down to. And now I'm presented with a fifth type, right? That didn't show up before. We only had the 4 in the first presentation. And that was because I chose a specific folder, right? Archiving a folder is basically just copying documents, right? When I choose the main container, the HighQ site, or the Teams channel, then it knows, hey, there's an archive functionality available to you at that level of selection, right? So we choose archive. And then you see all your sort of HighQ stuff. Apologies to those of you who don't know about HighQ, but it's, there's wikis, blogs, there's all sorts of interesting functionality inside a HighQ site. We enable, you guys to sort of articulate exactly what that data is that you want to come across, some good governance, some good data hygiene, right, around setting sites to the proper status of being archived, removing all of the users, maybe as well, deleting the files upon archival, right? But if you don't do that at this stage, you can do it, later. So we enable you to go back to an archive that was previously run and then say, right now I'm ready to delete, right? Like, you might not want to do it all in one hit, but you can. And so there's a number of sort of configurations that we can do here. And this same applies to Microsoft Teams, okay? Channels, communications, all those sorts of things. That's it. All right, run through this process again. There's no such thing as a real-time archive, so we just basically save it as a manual workflow, and then it sits there in my workflow list as a pending, and I just simply go and start that. Okay, that'll now run in the background, and it doesn't matter how big that site is. They could have terabytes of data. We have a global bank as a customer, and they have moved over 1.5 terabytes of data from HighQ into SharePoint. And that was simply because they had data sitting in HighQ for so long and no real easy way of getting it out. And it wasn't because they necessarily needed to keep it there. It was just that in lieu of any other solution that allowed them to do this, it was manual. And they had a couple of people full-time employed just to try and manually archive that data down. So we, obviously made that process a whole lot simpler. So that's kind of the gist of Syncly, right? Like, everything is about workflows. Okay, if you talk to the Ascertus people, the pricing is really simple. It's just based on workflows. We don't try to get you for all sorts of little things. Oh, you wanted archiving? That's an additional feature. It's really straightforward. It's really quite simple, guys. We can definitely kind of expand a little bit more on the detail around versioning and all sorts of things that we show. But just a bit of a snapshot there in regards to 2 types of workflows. And clearly, you might end up having multiple syncs. We have customers that have 300 or 400, I think even now 500 concurrent syncs going between different locations. All tend to be stemming from iManage out to SharePoint, out to HighQ, out to Teams. iManage does tend to be the hub that all of these things sort of revolve around. But it really depends on your use cases and what you're trying to do. But that's basically the product. So I can probably hand it back to you, Adam, and we can look at doing some Q&A, I suppose.
Hey, perfect. Thanks, Stu. That was really straightforward and perfectly well timed as well. So we can jump into let me just share my screen.
It was there, then it disappeared.
See that? Hopefully.
Yep.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
Great. Yeah. So now we're just going to go through the questions that have been submitted. And thanks for going through that, Stu. That was really straightforward, really simple to use. There was a couple of questions that I have here, so I'll just read them out and see if you can help answer that. That'd be great. The first question here is, all these are anonymous. So we are looking at solutions that connect HighQ with iManage, solutions like CUnity. How does Syncly differ from CUnity?
Look, at the face of it, we do the same thing. Okay, and I think it really gets down to when you look at how we actually build those integrations and provide that functionality. We are cloud first, right? We can work with iManage on-prem. You don't need to install Syncly on-prem in order to do that. We have the way to do that, right? So you're getting Syncly in the cloud. That's the first thing, right? It's not an on-prem solution; it's a cloud solution. And secondly, from functionality wise, the archival piece is unique, right? If you're just synchronizing data, so Unity does that, but you also gain access to the archival functionality that we have, which is, I guess, a point of differentiation. And there's things coming down the roadmap which are going to take us even further away from a direct comparison to C Unity, but right now, they're the things that jump out at me.
Okay, awesome. Some customers worry about data journey. Are there any encryptions during the flow?
Heaps. So we're a SOC 2 compliant company. We live and breathe security. And so yes, we use 256-bit AES encryption in transit and in rest. We also allow customers to have their own encryption key storage module. We're heavily aligned to the Microsoft Azure database. We also don't manage users. So all of the user access and things into Syncly is done through federated services, right? So there is no user accounts inside Syncly for us to sort of have to manage for you. The data is encrypted in transit and in rest. The databases are separate. We've architected this, from the ground up to be a full sort of Microsoft microservices product. So there's a lot of segregation as well as encryption.
Perfect. And if a document is created in SharePoint and then synced to iManage, who is the author as shown in iManage if there aren't any users in iManage?
Yeah, great question. So it's the owner of the workflow. So whoever sets up, when a person gets access to Syncly, they actually have to authenticate that connector as themselves. We didn't talk about that, but the connectors go in there and they're dumb connectors, right? You then goes, well, Adam, you need to authenticate iManage, you need to authenticate HighQ, and we use the OAuth standard for that. And for those of you who are not sure what the OAuth standard is, you might have experienced in your home life where it says, oh, so-and-so application wants permission to use your data. Can you type in your username and your password? Type in your iManage username and password. Type in your HighQ username and password. And that's what the connector runs at, right? It runs as you, which allows us to make sure that we're not breaching any information, barriers that might be in place. You're not going to see anything that you shouldn't see. You are literally looking into HighQ as you're just doing it through Syncly. And because of that, that's also the